Welcome to the Women's March Canada podcast, making the equality of women in Canada the new norm. This is episode 52, and it's titled, Are We Having Fun Yet? My name is Melissa Durrell, and I'm your host. Women's March Canada inspires, unites, and leads the charge for the advancement of women across Canada. Please welcome this week's guest, Martha van Berkel. Martha, so good to have you.
Here. Excited to be here.
All right, I'm going to give a little bit on who you are. So she's the co-founder of Schema app, which is a tool set used for creating, managing, and measuring structural data for websites. We're going to unpack that. The application translates content found on the web so that it can be easily understood by search engines. Martha has an engineering background from Queen's University, and she's originally from Vancouver, moved to Silicon Valley, where she got her start at Cisco Systems. And Martha is in Guelph with her two husbands, her one husband and her two kids, right? We didn't get that mixed up. Yeah. Mark won't like that. And speaking of Mark, so, I mean, you're one of several female founders that I know that actually are partnered with their life partners in their company. So let's start that out. How'd that happen?
We call it partners in everything.
Right?
It's sort of how it goes.
Yeah.
Absolutely. It's amazing. Yeah. So if you can find that person who complements both your skills as well as that you love hanging out with on weekends and sort of troubleshooting everything, whether it be bad behavior all the way to leaks in the house to, figuring out how you're going to grow your business. It's amazing. So Mark and I met, we met online. So we're one of those kind of
you're one of those.
We joked about could we actually get paid to do a commercial for eHarmony? Because if we could make money off of it, we might be up for it. And Mark's actually the brains behind the software piece of it. So he has a background in semantic technology, and he really wanted to explore if there was an application of that after finishing his MBA. And so he sort of started working on that technology and kind of playing with it while I was still at Cisco. And then, when I decided, I had Ruth, my daughter, and then at that point I was like, oh, could I try selling this thing that you're building, and what would that look like? And so, just by nature of my personality being that sort of outgoing, wanting to talk to people, being able to translate really complicated things into kind of less complicated concepts, all of a sudden I was the sales and marketing person to sort of his application. And our company, as most companies, have had lots of twists and turns to where we got to something that both we love doing as well as, what the market was looking. And you said the title was Are we having fun yet? I think that's something I always talk about. In one version of our company, we were coaching small and medium-sized businesses on online tasks that they should complete. So can we break down this whole search engine optimization into kind of tasks you can do in 15 minutes? Mm-hmm. But the small and medium-sized businesses didn't want us to spend 15 minutes on it, so they had us do it. And so we became this digital marketing agency. And while we were working on some other things, which now exist as Schema app, we had this conversation of, are we having fun? Did we leave our enterprise jobs in order to become a digital marketing agency and provide service to customers? And the answer was absolutely not. It was, being an entrepreneur, especially in those early days, is really hard, right? It's, everyone kind of glamorizes that it's this sexy, fun thing, being your own boss. But in the early days, there's
$1 million deals all over the place. And
and that's just not how it happens, right? It's hard, and it's you usually have not a lot of money, and you're having to be scrappy and creative, and especially so those days were really hard, and I think working with your husband, it's one of those things where you have to be able to have those tough conversations and be able to decide. So are we having fun yet? Basically, it was no, we don't want to be a digital marketing agency. We don't want to be building websites for SMBs. That's not using our gifts and sort of our passions. And so that's actually when we were but this one thing that we had built that the market and Google was now supporting was interesting, which was the very early stages of Schema app. So I'll never forget, it was August 2015. We rewrote our website in September 11th, 2015, where we talked about being a semantic search marketing company, which I think to this day still confuses people. And that was sort of us leading that passion, focusing on what we love, as well as sort of making sure that we were getting pumped up in our day-to-day.
So what you do is actually really interesting, and it basically machines are, well, you explain it because you're way better at it than I am, but it's really grown because we are talking to machines way more than we ever talked to machines before. And
Absolutely.
And we're not doing it very well because we're humans and we don't write in code. So that's essentially, you bridge that gap. Is that correct?
It is, yeah, yeah. It's the big thing is like we translate content to be understood by machines, and I use the word machines because it Google is sort of this application we interact with, but now as I'm washing my hands or putting the dishes in the dishwasher in the morning as I'm getting ready to shoot my kids off to school, I'm asking what Alexa or Google Home, like what the weather is, right? So now I'm interacting with another machine asking questions and content. And so what we do is like a super nerdy type of translation. It's usually termed as a search engine optimization strategy, where we structure the content or translate the content that's currently on your website into this machine language called Schema Markup that was created by Google, Yahoo, and Bing back in 2011. And the tools that we've created empower a marketer to do it. So someone to do it without being technical, without having to write code. And I often joke that like I'm thought as like a thought leader and an expert in this space, and like I don't write JSON-LD, I don't write the code, but I have amazing tools that the team's built that allow us to do that without needing to do it. So I can focus on the fun parts, right? Creating the strategy, looking at all the other things that play into my content plan, so that I know that that's happening.
So it's becoming more and more important that we communicate with machines clearly. But why does it matter? Why does it matter that we're doing that today?
Yeah, so I talk about usually I talk about like how that experience is changing, because I think as consumers we're sort of leading that change, maybe not in a business standpoint, but we're leading the change in sort of, again, how we're asking for the weather, or if we're talking to Alexa about ordering something, like we never actually go and look for who we're going to buy it from. We're just going to buy it from Amazon because like Amazon is sitting in the room, Alexa's taking my order and so forth. And so with our marketer hat on, all of a sudden everyone's been thinking about like, well, what am I going to put on the big billboard? Right. And that's not changed to be like, what am I going to put in my Google ad that's sitting there? Or what colors are my logo going to be? And the whole thing is that through this voice interaction or maybe virtual reality, no one's ever going to get to your website. And so who cares what color your logo is or what that ad looks like, because no one's ever going to see it. And so as we think about this like new way that we as humans are starting to ask for service, like ask to get information, the marketer now has to manage that data and how that information is being understood. And so today, like people do it so that they can get better results in organic search and they can get images in search. So that's the other way you experience it as a consumer. But for the thought forward marketers, like they need to start thinking about how do they do this very technical strategy so that their brand is being understood exactly how they want it to be understood.
Right. And I think what's so important when I think about your company moving into the future is that there are hackers and there are people out there. When we talk about fake news, if they're doing a better job of search optimizing, I often think, through my Women's March Twitter handle, I hashtag Women's March and I follow that hashtag. And every once in a while, a pro-life tag, because they're hashtagging that, and that's and it's super offensive, some of the stuff that's coming up on my, and so it's really important that you are that you're tagging where you need to be tagged. Would you say?
Absolutely. I can give you an example. And this actually goes to our very early days where there was this gentleman who worked for an organization in the US who was trying to battle, and I believe it was like boarding schools that were more like cults. And,
right.
So an area that I didn't know a lot about, but, listening to this gentleman. And so he was actually, how do we stay 10 steps ahead of these not great people who are trying to promote and sort of win the search engine optimization and have hundreds and millions of dollars behind them in advertising. And here's like, a nonprofit led by this, actually it's led by a woman who just like is just so passionate about battling and keeping kids safe. And it was, and so it was so interesting. So he was like a really early adopter of some of the work that we were doing in order to use that as a way to differentiate. So whatever means, whether it be sort of beating your competition, which is usually the conversations we have with companies, or being relevant in your community and sort of in the news, or making sure that your voice is heard.
Right.
Those are all sort of the things that as we sort of get different channels of information, right? And I joke that I get a lot of my filtered of news through the Twitters and through the Facebooks and so forth, versus traditional media. What does that look like over time when, we're actually going to have these new channels? So it's depending on the angle and sort of your passion area, there's different reasons why that's going to be very important.
Yeah, and I love that. And I think, this is such a growing space, and it's so exciting that I'm excited to see where your company's going to go. Now, let's go back in time a little bit.
Sure.
You're part of the Fierce Founders group, which is female founders, and it's a program out of Communitech. And that really was born out of this idea that we need to start to give resources to more women to run their businesses. How important was that in
our journey?
Yeah, in your journey.
It was actually very important. I think partly we did the Fierce Founders Bootcamp. So there's a couple different programs that Communitech now offers, and it's evolved over the last couple of years. But the bootcamp was getting 24 founders together, and in my class it was a sort of range of maturity, right? So some of us had product and revenue, some people had an idea. The ages ranged actually from people who were in their late teens all the way up into their 60s. So it was like this really fun, diverse group of women that got together, and they took us through the basics, right? Like, do you know who you're selling to? Do you know what you're doing? And it was these 2-3 week sort of residential weeks where we went to Communitech. And what was really great for us is that it sort of had us step back and work on the business. But second, it also really sort of got us more involved in the community and sort of in the entrepreneurial community in Waterloo. Like, we had been members of Communitech for years, but we hadn't really been involved. And so when we pitched, we were in the top 8 there. So we pitched for $100,000. We didn't win, but it got us also into the Fierce Founders Accelerator. And so the Accelerator played a really big role for us because it got us out of our basement. So here was Mark and I. We now had to commute to Kitchener from Guelph, which is a 45-minute drive for those of you that don't live here, which meant we had like an hour and a half every day just in the car together talking about whatever was important. So it was a great connect time. Yeah. But it also, they really pushed us to hire someone, right, for Mark to kind of hand off some of his work. And so Gary joined us while we were there, and then we hired a second person in September. And then leading to that, we then sort of took a big risk and rented a space before we knew how we were going to pay for it, hired another employee in December, moved into the new space in March, and here we are.
So that's interesting because really you get into this accelerator and you're almost getting pushed to a point where you're not, but you needed that to get where you are today, right?
Part of it's like, believing that it's possible, right? I often think, in whatever part of your life, right? Whether it be sort of meeting that perfect person or getting through your first degree or starting a company or just getting that promotion at work. Part of it is like you have to you almost need like that nudge to just like leap into this space. Mm-hmm. And I remember very clearly that sort of, contemplation of leading corporate life, right? And being like, holy smokes, like, am I really going to be an entrepreneur? Like, are we going to really do this? And so Communitech, I think, was a little like a bit of that boot in the butt to sort of be like, lean forward, like lean into it, and try to accelerate and see what happens. And
the first time that I bungee jumped, and I had to go forward, but I was holding on, and my brain would not let my hands let go. And I finally turned around to the person behind me and I said, "You just have to push me." And then you go and you love it. It's amazing. But like, my brain wouldn't let me let go.
Absolutely. Life is like that, right?
Totally. And having, like, you could always get a job in a tech company because of your experience, but you continue to hold on to this dream, which I think is really interesting. What kept you there?
For me, it's about adventure and learning, right? So it's, some entrepreneurs go in to make like the big bucks, right? We're going to go in and we're going to grow a company. We're going to sell it, like, high five, like you're done. What an amazing life experience for me. One, to build this with my husband, with Mark. And just like every month or week, like I'm learning something new. Like this week, it's like, Martha, like you need to get into the nitty gritty of like how to sell to an enterprise, and, go ahead and here are like 5 things you need to create and just like go and pitch that. And like, honestly, I'm really really confident talking to people, but like, holy smokes, like I had a fierce conversation on Thursday, like something I'd never done before, like something just totally different. And it like felt uncomfortable and good, but that's also sort of when you feel your pulse, and sort of feel that you're alive. And I think the other, like I often get asked, like I had kids like while we started the business, which was kind of crazy. And I often like have entrepreneurs being like, well, when's the right time to have kids? I'm like, never, it's never the right time to like just do it because it's amazing. But the other cool experience that's coming out of this is to be that role model, especially for my daughter. So my daughter's 5 and my son's 3, but especially for my daughter so that like she knows what an entrepreneur is. And, like yesterday we got invited to Google to go to the book launch of Ara, the Star Engineer, which is this great book around, like these coders and solving problems through collaboration and brainstorming. And, what a great experience for Ruth and I to be there together. So one, she could see sort of, who are these amazing smart women, right? And what does it look like to sort of also have your mom just like introduce herself? Oh, I run my own company. Like this is what I do. So that kind of thing, and being able to be that role model and walk the talk of you can be anything and you can do anything because they're watching, right?
That makes me so happy, Martha. I can't even tell you.
Yeah.
So, okay, so let's do a couple things because I want to be mindful of the time, and I want to make sure that we get everything in. One of the things I really want to talk to you about is you kill it on stage. That you really do. Like you're a great speaker. What do you do? How did you get to that point?
Started very young.
Yeah.
So I did concours d'oratoire, so public speaking in Winnipeg. So I think I was the provincial champ or the runner-up sort of in grade 2 or grade 3, where you had to sort of, tell a speech. So I wrote a speech about the Calgary Olympics. It was in '86. I was 8. And, it was just something that I love doing. And so whether it be like the Rush or it just happens to be one of those talents. And when I think part of being self-aware of like what are the things you're really great at and how do you do more of that, and how do you make sure you're also prepared to do that. So as Melissa and I have worked together, where it's how do you make sure you know what those messages are, and also but are true to yourself with also sort of trying to influence the group, and then also bring yourself. So part of it's practice. Keep practicing.
Yeah.
Putting yourself out there for opportunities to do it. And so recently I always said like I want to be the voice of our company and also talk about sort of where the market's going, because I'm a dot connector and I really like presenting. So those are 2 things that I love to do.
Yeah.
So are we having fun? Yes, I'm doing the things I love to do. But practice, and the practice can start in very safe environments, right? So whether it be presenting at a Rotary or going to your child's school and presenting to the kids there, I think that if it's something that you want to work on and doesn't come naturally, there's lots of opportunities to do that. And it's just a matter of going out there, practicing, and then finding your voice that you can be true to who you are in sort of how you're talking about things versus something that's more scripted and trying to give someone else's message, kind of make it a bit your own.
What was one of the favorite places you spoke at and why?
Oh, that's a hard one.
Catching off guard here. I'm sorry. You were at True North, which was cool, which was a big conference in Canada. You've been to Austin. I mean, you've been all over the world, for God's sake. So was there one that you were like, oh my gosh, that was such a great audience, and I'd do that every day of my life if I could?
So I think the one that was most fun recently was I spoke at the Fierce Founders boot camp pitch. And so I was sort of asked as an alumni to come and talk about our journey, and to be able to kind of stand there and tell my story, as well as share sort of how the different sort of female community and sort of entrepreneurial community has helped us get to where we are today. I was just really grateful about sort of able to share my story, but also sort of be within an audience that sort of is sort of in that leaning in sort of scary time where they're about to leap. So probably that inspirational side. And then I once presented to about 400 grade 9 girls about doing what you love. And that was probably one of my favorites as well.
That's cool. You brought up the Fierce Founders, and we're currently working with some companies that are all female-led, and they're getting some money from the BDC. And there's a lot like that. We've got some venture capital funds that are only looking at female-led companies, but we still know that there's far fewer female founders than there are male, and the males are still getting that funding at 10 times the rate. What does it feel like to be out there right now? How can you explain it? And do you see those opportunities, or do you have to go get them? What does that look like?
Oh, I think no matter what, you have to go get them, right? Like you have to still sort of be bold and outspoken and sort of own your success. And I don't consider that being more male, right? It's about sort of like finding that courage within yourself and being female, or being like the person that you are. We aren't fundraising, so I don't have as much experience going in the VC world, which I hear is a very sort of male dominated, kind of what I would consider like old boys club from my technology days, sort of in sales. But I think what's amazing is that there is now this platform for us to go to, but we have to not be bashful, right? Like we have to believe, kind of going back to that like leap, we have to believe that it is possible you're going to get those, and keep knocking on those doors, and not take it personally sort of when someone says no. And so that's, I think, where sometimes our personalities kind of play a large role. And so, if you're trying to get that fundraising, sort of like partner with someone, female or male, like to help kind of encourage that, that lion inside of you that sort of wants to get hungry and go get those things. I was recently interviewed by Women of Influence, and the quote that they decided to build the article on was that my father said I was an outspoken young lady and he wouldn't change anything about me. And part of that shows up sometimes when I'm in a meeting and I raise my hand. I'm like, this is bullshit, right? Like, or, like, I don't agree with you. So it's like, how do we all find our lioness, right? And sort of have that boldness. And I think in the fundraising world, it's competitive. It is traditional. And so you have to sort of you have to learn how to play that game a little bit while also being true to yourself.
Amazing. Okay, so talk to me if we're going to give a shout out to some of the organizations that have helped you along the way. Of course, Fierce Founders, Communitech.
Innovation Guelph, huge. When we couldn't get the time of day in Toronto because there was just too many entrepreneurs, Innovation Guelph has been an amazing supporter sort of along the way. BDC has helped us out. Also, like great family and friends, right? I think we often don't go back to those people like, who made me dinner when, we couldn't afford to go out. So like, my parents would have a steak dinner and it was just like the most amazing thing. And the city of Guelph has also, I would say, sort of like been, we won Startup of the Year. And so they've sort of celebrated those successes as we've done them. I think of it others, but those would be sort of the key ones, I think, as we've journeyed. We've had a great mentor from KPMG for years that he's worked with us like from those very early days. And actually the University of Guelph, like we've gotten some great talent from them and continue to work with them, which was, we didn't anticipate, but we've gotten some great people from there.
How can people find you, Martha? If they want to book you to speak, or if they want to check out your company, give us the... Absolutely.
So you can find me on Twitter at Martha van Berkel. Our company is Schema App, so www.schemaapp, SCHEMA app.com. If you Google anything about structured data at scale, you'll kind of come across me or one of my videos. Someone once asked if I was a voiceover, and I said, no, it's just me. I'm the CEO. I just record all the videos. And then you can find us online anywhere sort of for Schema App.
Very cool. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, yay. Thanks, Martha. And I've got you out on time to make your next meeting.
Amazing. Thanks so much.
So thanks to our guest, Martha van Berkel. And thank you to everyone who tuned in to listen. Your comments are welcomed and also encouraged. Please subscribe to our Women's March Canada channel and receive updates every time we upload a podcast, which usually is on a Friday. Our mission across Canada is to stand together in solidarity with our partners and children for the protection of our rights, our safety, our health, and our families, recognizing that our vibrant and diverse communities are the strength of our country.
Amen.
Yeah, right? This is the Women's March Canada podcast. You can find us on Twitter at Women's March CDA and our website, womensmarchcanada.com. I'm Melissa Darrell, and I'm wishing you an amazing day. Awesome.